Hello students, Mr. Young here. Today we're doing Chapter 4, Lesson 4. It's probably about October 5th if you're working by the due date. Today's lesson is called Rivalry in North America, but it could really be called the French and Indian War. In today's lesson, we're getting down to some nitty-gritty warfare. The two biggest kids on the block in North America are Britain and France. They've been beating up on each other literally for centuries. They've been fighting. Now there's a new piece of turf. And both sides have stakes planted. France has a great deal of territory in inland America, and Britain has the coast. Think of where the 13 colonies are. They're all on the coast. Right between the French territory and the British territory is what's called the Ohio River Valley, a valuable chunk of land that both sides want. What ensues might be described as the two biggest dogs in the yard fighting over a fresh bone from the butcher. Let's learn about it. A lot of information in this lesson. Okay, so as mentioned on the prior page, there was no love between Britain and France. Both were making money in America, but in two different kinds of ways. The French territory of New France was sparsely populated. Let's take a look at it. New France map. Not what I was looking for. There we go. See, all the blue territory is French, all the red is British. So these are the 13 original British colonies. I like that one better, it's a little bigger. There you go, and then Spanish turf is down there. They're going to be a little important at the end. So that's what our area is looking like. The French were fur trappers. They did not have a lot of major cities and permanent colonies. A lot of their people that lived in the area were spread out, and they were fur traders. So they literally intermingled with Native American tribes. They traded with them. They had good working relationships with them. They would marry Native American women. They had a very good relationship with the natives. And as a result, most of the natives are going to side with the French in this war against Britain and her colonies. Moving on, we know that the British used their land differently. They were all about permanent settlements, and they were slowly spreading into French territory, and this is going to cause problems. The Ohio River Valley is, there we go, this sort of disputed area right here, the Ohio River Valley. But more specifically, if there was a focal point, it would be Pittsburgh, where Pittsburgh is located now, western Pennsylvania. The French saw the encroaching problem of the British expanding it into their territory, and as a result, they built a chain of forts, really, all along this area, down from Canada, all the way to the Ohio River Valley, to Pittsburgh. So, they build that up. Britain tries calling dibs on a particular point that is now downtown Pittsburgh, but France grabbed it up by building a fortress on it. So what is downtown Pittsburgh had a big fort on it called Fort Duquesne. It was now on like Donkey Kong, as the kids would say. In 1754, the governor of the colony of Virginia sends a force of militia to go try to put a British presence in the Ohio River Valley. What is a militia? A militia is a non-professional military force. Basically, it's when citizens grab their guns and now they're an army. It's kind of crazy now. It would be like Tom Wolfe saying to us, giving me a call and be like, Mr. Yund, Canada just stole the county of Erie. Erie County is now Canada's. We need to have a militia and go take it back. Go grab your gun and get all the other dudes. Go grab your guns. Let's march up to Erie. That's what a militia is. It sounds crazy to us now, but militias were pretty prevalent back then, and really through a lot of history. There weren't a lot of professional soldiers. You had a lot of citizen soldiers. So that's what a militia is. Teachers, farmers, craftsmen, the like. Just regular people going to go fight. Granted, folk were hardy back then, but still, seems kind of crazy to think about. Regardless, he sends this militia to the Ohio River Valley, led by none other than a very young and a colonel, George Washington. This is where George Washington starts to become a hero. So George Washington and his Virginia militia head to the Ohio River Valley. Their task is to build a fortress on the point of the rivers. On the way there, they find out, oh snap, there's already a fort there. Fort Duquesne, the French beat us to it. And he's pretty angry about this, and they vent some rage, attacking some French they find in the woods on their way there. Turns out to be a mistake, because some of those French escape, and they go back to Fort Duquesne and warn them that there's this force led by George Washington headed to the point. So a whole bunch of Frenchmen come out of the fort and go attack George Washington in the woods. Before George Washington gets attacked, he finds out from, I believe, from a Native American that there's this big French force coming. And so he tries to buckle down and fortify in what is a hastily constructed fort known as Fort Necessity. You've probably heard of it. It's still floating around over there. Not the original fort, but it's a historical site in Pennsylvania. You may have seen it. See, it's not much of a fort. It's more of just like a wooden barricade and some mounds of dirt. So they have a little bit of time to build this fortress. The French come, they attack Washington at his little tiny fort, and they're defeated. Mostly Washington's outnumbered, his force is in bad shape, and there's a terrible rainstorm during this battle, and everything gets so wet that their guns won't even fire anymore. So when the French offer Washington to surrender, he does surrender, and Washington and his force of Virginians are sent back to Virginia. Fort Duquesne belongs to the French, and the Ohio River Valley is still under French control. On the topic of Native American allies, Indian allies, the French had the edge for all the reasons I mentioned in the beginning of the lesson. They just didn't trust the British because they tended to steal their lands, whereas the French just kind of cohabitated with them and did business. So most of the natives sided with the French. The British did try to make an alliance with what was known as the Iroquois Confederacy, which was this very powerful, alliance of 6 Indian tribes in the American Northeast. The Confederacy did not ally themselves with the British, but they did agree to stay neutral, which is to say they didn't take a side. This big meeting that they had was in a place called Albany, New York, which is still around, still Albany, New York. And while that alliance with the natives didn't work out, they did come up with this thing called the Albany Plan of the Union, and all the delegates agreed to it, and it was really the first attempt to sort of make a single government, a single alliance for the 13 colonies. The main idea being that if all the colonies worked together, it would be easier to fight the Native Americans and the French. So the delegates all agreed on the plan, but when they took it back to their colonies for approval, none of the colonies wanted to join this alliance, and so the Albany Plan of the Union was a failure, and now we talk about it in history class as the first but failed attempt of the 13 colonies to create a national government. Let's talk about the war grinding on. Where are we at? 8 minutes. We've got 15. We're doing good. The French began with early success in the French and Indian War. They captured some British forts. They repelled Washington's attack, where he was headed for Fort Duquesne, and the Native Americans were raiding the English frontier with success. The turning point of the war came when Britain got a new prime minister, which is kind of like a president, but you have to remember Britain has a king. So they have a king and a prime minister. The prime minister, this new prime minister, was a guy by the name of William Pitt. Pitt was a pretty smart guy. He sent more troops and better leaders to the North American theater of war. He also stopped taxing the colonies right then to pay for the war, which would make it more popular. You have to understand that before Pitt was prime minister, Britain kind of had like the B squad military in North America. Pitt sent the A squad. Or if you're a hockey guy, the third line was playing in America. He sent the first line. So that's what really changed it. British and colonial forces, with this new support, these better military units, started to win and had a lot of winning battles that your book is sadly inadequate on. It doesn't talk a lot about it, but some of these big, battles that the British win would be Fort Duquesne. They finally go back and take Fort Duquesne. Louisbourg, Frontenac. They conquer a lot of Canadian cities like Quebec. Pitt basically didn't just take the Ohio River Valley. His domination of the war really conquered much of Canada and ends up kicking the French out of North America totally. After conquering Montreal in Canada the next year, the war's pretty much over. Now, the French and Indian War was actually a third of a larger war called the 7 Years' War. So this war was raging over in Europe as well. The 7 Years' War, and as a result, the French and Indian War, end with the Treaty of Paris in 1763. France lost. They got beat up pretty good, and as a result, this didn't end well for them. They ended up ceding all of their pretty much Canadian holdings and its lands east of the Mississippi River. Britain also gained Spanish Florida. See, Florida belongs to Spain because Spain was allied with France. French power in North America was broken. You can see all the results down here. See, purple was British, orange was French. Before, after. It's all just purple now. One more thing before we end. New British policies. The natives had mostly sided with France. And then France got its butt kicked, so this isn't going to be good for the Native Americans. It's like you have a big brother on the school bus protecting you from the bullies, and then your big brother leaves. And now it's like, uh-oh, you're in trouble. And this is basically what happened to the natives. The British punished the natives by basically taking their land and giving them awful business, selling them overpriced goods. One Native American chief of note in your book was Pontiac. It's a car named after Pontiac. He was a big warlord of the natives, fighting against the British, allied to the French. And when the French lost, all of his Native American warriors and their tribes basically gave up, forcing Pontiac to surrender. Now, in terms of policies, to prevent more problems with the natives, the King of Britain, King George, made what was called the Proclamation of 1763, where he drew an imaginary line at the Appalachian Mountains and said, all right, nobody move past the Appalachian Mountains. Stop making the Native Americans mad. To enforce this rule, he sent 10,000 British regulars into the colonies, and the colonists did not like any of this, because first off, they didn't like being told that they couldn't move further west, and they did not care for this increased troop presence in the colonies. The icing on this cake of colonial agitation would be that the taxes Britain would levy to pay off the debt they accumulated fighting France in North America. So this is going to be problems down the line, which leads directly to the American Revolution coming up in a few chapters. Now, there's a ton of information, and there's a lot more we didn't even go over. We could probably do a whole course on the French and Indian War. If you want to learn more, I have all these links down here. But in terms of testable material, pretty much here up, everything here. But if you want to learn more, I have some awesome links here. The Battle of Fort Necessity, Pontiac right here. The Battle for Quebec is a really cool one. But I would say the best resource I provided is there's a link here for a video to Crash Course in History. That is a great video, about 13 minutes long, talks all about the 7 Years' War. On the next page, we have a quiz. You get multiple attempts. It's not very hard. I made it so it wouldn't crush your souls because this was a hard lesson. There's a lot in there. That's all for now. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great day.